Why is your little one waking up and keeping you up at night? That is the question that so many parents ask, whether you have a newborn, an infant, a toddler, or a preschooler. And by the way, this might be even helpful for you as a sleeper. We want to talk about the things that might be holding you back from getting that good night of sleep. In our most sleep deprived moments, our children will teach us exactly what we need in order to learn and grow into who we were created to be. These are the loving lessons we will learn whether we were wanting to or not. I'm Irene Googe, your sleep coach, and I'm on mission to educate parents on how to help their young children sleep. Welcome to the journey. Hello, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to do a deep dive, understand a little bit more around why our little ones might be waking up at nighttime. No matter what age or stage or season of life you are in with your little one, this may be really helpful as we think about the things that we're focusing on when it comes to sleep. Yes, we're going to dive into what to stay focused on, understanding your baby's sleep cycle, as well as understanding the sleep stages at nighttime. So let's dive into all these details. So first, one of the areas that I find that sometimes can be troublesome for families that keeping them up at night is that oftentimes we're focused on the wrong thing. Here's what I mean. As parents, sometimes we're going to Dr. Google, who doesn't have any children, or we're going to a sleep book or to a website to get that perfect, just right schedule. I know it would just make your life so much easier if you had that just right schedule. And while schedules can be helpful, that's actually the second phase of getting good sleep. The first phase is really honing in and understanding those sleep expectations. Now, you might be wondering, what am I talking about by those sleep expectations? Sleep expectations are, have we done a bedtime routine, a rhythm and routine that lets the body know it's time to go to sleep? Here's what I mean. For me as an adult, when I'm going to sleep at nighttime, I'm washing my face, taking off my makeup, brushing my teeth, changing out of my clothes into pajamas. My body starts to know and equate these behaviors with, hey, the body is getting ready to go to sleep. These are the sleep expectations that are unfolding that help my body prepare to let go. A lot of times we talk about the skill of learning to go to sleep. It's actually the bedtime routine that sets the tone for going to sleep. And so while, yes, a schedule and doing it around the same time is definitely going to be helpful, what's more important is tuning into the body and allowing it to drift off and go to sleep. And this might make a little more sense after we look at your baby's sleep cycle and the sleep stages. Now, if you are just listening to this podcast, I'm going to encourage you to pause and maybe go check out the blog post so you can see the image that I'm referring to. Or you might want to check this out on YouTube where you can actually watch and see the visual that I'm going to be talking about here. So we've talked about focusing on those sleep expectations, right? We're preparing the body. It's ready to go to sleep. Well, let's dive in and look at what do you need to understand about your baby's sleep cycle. Now, this chart here that you're taking a look at is the baby sleep cycle, which happens between 40 to 50 minutes. Now, you may have heard that like a nap is one sleep cycle is 45 minutes. That is just the average for a particular child. Every single person and child is unique in their sleep cycles. And here's what I know. Over the last 10 years when I've been doing this work, parents will tell me like, my baby only slept 37 minutes. My baby slept 44 minutes. They tell me to a minute as to how long that baby's sleep cycle is. And what's happening within that sleep cycle is at the onset, they are starting to fall asleep. And your child is in a lighter state of sleep. They're in a REM state of sleep at the beginning. And so they can easily be woken up if we're putting them down, if there's noise, or there's a change in the sleep environment. Oftentimes, if you've ever had that situation where you've been holding your child and then you lay them down and they pop up, that is a good example of the sleep environment changing. Then we go into the next state, which happens somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes. Your child is now transitioning into a deeper sleep, and now your child becomes unaware of their surrounding. The next 20 to 30 minutes, your child is transitioning from a light state of sleep to a deeper sleep. And you're going to notice more shallow breathing where it's deep and more regulated. And this is the restorative part of a sleep cycle. So your child started out in a light sleep, they got to a deep sleep, and now they're going to transition out of that deep sleep back to a light sleep, somewhere between 30 to 40 minutes, where if your child is either under or overtired, they can fully wake up. And somewhere between this 40 to 50-minute mark, they're back in that light, active state of sleep where it's super easy for your little one to wake up. And so your child will wake up, sometimes have a partial arousal, and then go back to sleep. Or your child may wake up and then they may be done with that sleep period. Again, so much of this is going to depend on your child's age and stage. So if you have a newborn or an infant, you will notice these sleep cycles more frequently. As you get into the toddler and preschool stages, that's where you'll notice, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hour nap. You'll see your child go through the cycle just that one time during the daytime for that one nap. But early on, some of the naps may end up being short. Some may be long because they may go through 2 sleep cycles, but it will depend on the rhythms and routines that you have set in your day. In my Healthy Sleep Foundations course, I do a deep dive into understanding the feeding routines and how they drive the sleep routines. Because believe it or not, the feeding and sleeping are what help us regulate ourselves during the day. And if we feed well, then guess what? We will sleep well. And of course, during that wakeful time between the feeding and the sleep, we want to be able to also move our bodies well. And so making sure all these things are working together makes a huge difference with your little one and their sleep cycle. And that's, of course, what's going to help you figure out that just right amount of sleep pressure to make sure that your child's not overtired, but also not undertired. In the blog post, I share a link to the sleep chart so you can take a look at how much sleep your child needs depending on their age and stage. Now, let's transition and think about these sleep cycles and how they play out in understanding our baby's sleep stages at nighttime. Now, I want you to take a look at the sleep stages chart. You're going to notice that the green is the waking period. This is when we're awake, whether it's the onset of going to sleep or we're waking up from a sleep. The pink area is a REM state of sleep. This is our dreaming state. And the blue area is going to be our light sleep, and the purple is going to be our deep sleep. When I'm working with families as a postpartum doula or sleep coach, I really want families to really understand their child's active sleep and deep sleep patterns, because that's going to help us communicate more effectively in understanding where our little ones are at. Especially in the newborn season, what's important to understand is that our children spend about 55 to 65% of their day in a light state of sleep. That's right. They're going to be moving around, a little more alert and awake, and they only spend about 33% of their time in a deep sleep. The other portion is left, about 10%, between an active and a deep sleep state. And so oftentimes this can become really confusing for new parents. I know that this is what I struggled with. I had no idea that I was disrupting my boys' sleep learning process all of the time. It was just a misunderstanding because I had no idea. And that's why I think it's really important to get to the basics and understand these sleep stages so we understand why we're making the decisions we are to help create healthy sleep patterns. So if you take a look at the line going through the chart, notice how the beginning part of the night, our babies will get themselves into a deeper sleep, which is why we typically will start to see our little ones get that first part of the night where we'll start to see perhaps a 3 to 5 hour stretch of sleep develop. And maybe after that, we might start to notice a 6 to 8 hour stretch of sleep develop. And then we might see the last part of sleep develop where we go from an 8 to maybe a 12-hour stretch of sleep develop. What happens, especially for children at the beginning part of the night, is they fall into these deeper sleeps and we get that bigger, longer stretch of sleep at the beginning part of the night. And this is where families will experience those longer stretches of sleep where babies will sleep until maybe 12, 1 o'clock, maybe even 2 o'clock before they wake up. Now, if you take a look at those lines towards the end, where all of a sudden we start to see more of the yellow and pink lines come up, we're going to notice in those early morning hours between 2 in the morning and 6 in the morning that our babies are going to be in a light state of sleep, probably happening every 20 to 40 to 60 minutes. You're going to notice your baby going through a REM state of sleep. And so babies will wake up more frequently as the night goes on. That's the harder part of the time of the night to put yourself to sleep. And this is why I'm sharing this with you. When we teach our little ones on the onset, this is how we go to sleep, it makes it easier for them to move through these partial arousals that are happening. The partial arousals are everything that you're seeing in those pink and yellow humps. That is when the body naturally is transitioning from a deep sleep to a light sleep throughout the evening time. Now, if you notice your child waking every 20 minutes, every hour, which sometimes does happen for some families, then typically that's happening because there's something in how our child is actually going to sleep that is causing them to have more like naps throughout the night, which can really be exhausting for you and for your little one. This is why when I'm working with families, the first place we begin is making sure that that bedtime, which is the easiest time of day for little ones to go to sleep, that's why we focus so much there. We want to focus on those sleep expectations and allowing our child to do the work of putting themselves to sleep. And even when our little ones are putting themselves to sleep, we will be there with them because they need us to help them go to sleep. But it doesn't mean we have to do all of the work for our little one to go to sleep. And so this is where I work with families to understand the division of responsibility for sleep, understanding what our child's body will be communicating to us, understanding their sleep learning process, and how your little one is putting themselves to sleep. Because here's what I see happen oftentimes. And if you take a look at this stages of sleep that is going on, perhaps with your child in their home, is every single time your child is having one of those partial arousals, if you are maybe holding your child to sleep, feeding them to sleep, rocking them to sleep, bouncing them to sleep, giving them a pacifier to sleep, whatever it is that you do to help your child go to sleep, you might be doing more of the work than your child. And so when they have that partial arousal, which we know they're going to do because they're going to transition from a deep sleep to a light sleep, your child calls out and says, "Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, I need you to come do that thing you do to help me go back to sleep." And so that is really the reason why our children will wake up at nighttime. And so we can help our newborn, our infant, our toddler, or preschooler go back to sleep based on a consistent response and how we communicate with them. And again, this takes me back to the sleep cycle. We want to make sure that we have a nice rhythm and flow of feeding established first. And if our little ones are feeding at nighttime frequently, which sometimes as our babies go through growth spurts, they will, I see this really quickly happen somewhere around that 4th month and somewhere between 8 to 10 months of age. If you go back to the podcast where I talk about those potential sleep regressions, what ends up happening is our little ones get so busy during the day, they're like, "Hey, I'll just eat at nighttime." And they flip their feeding clock. And so what accidentally happens over time is our little ones get busy during the day and might not be feeding as well. And so now all of a sudden their sleep stages are all mixed up because they're like, "Hey, I'm going to eat at night instead of during the day." So when we can shift our focus from the schedule We can be intentional about creating bedtime routines, nap time routines that help create sleep expectations. Hey, this is how we go to sleep, and our child is going to be able to do the work. And believe it or not, biologically, your child will just drift off to sleep, no matter what their temperament is. What typically causes the most amount of crying is when we start switching how we do the going to sleep. Because if our child is like, hey, you always rock me, or you always hold me, or you always do whatever it is you do, then your child's going to have some words and some feelings about it, and they're going to let you know. So when we create flexible routines, we actually can shift that. We create a routine and we communicate more consistently, and we say, hey, honey, this is how we do it in our house. This is how we go to sleep. And you, of course, can be there and help your little one do that work. Now, in my sleep coaching success program, this is the number one area that I focus on with families to get started. This is why families start to see sleep changes begin happening, because when we understand our child's active and deep sleep patterns, and when they're putting themselves to sleep and how we're responding to them during those partial arousals, it makes all the difference. And so I just want to clarify when we talk about schedule. I am all in favor of having a consistent bedtime and a consistent wake time. Having those two bookends helps us and our body create an ability to be consistent and regular, and it helps us function well. During the first year and a half of life, sometimes those naps may need to be a little bit more flexible based on our child's developmental needs and nutritional needs, which will fluctuate. And so when we can focus on those sleep expectations and help our children through that learning process, then all of a sudden you will find that you will have your perfect schedule for your little one. And so I'm going to encourage you to, instead of getting that schedule, tune in and see what your child is communicating to you and help them work through that process of how they put themselves to sleep and be there with them through that process. It can make such a huge difference and can help everybody start sleeping better. Now, of course, if you have any questions, let's hop on a call and chat about it, because you know what? I don't want parents feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, and being sleep deprived. Let's get to a place where we can show up and lead with a calm confidence so that everyone's going to get the rest that they need. So I hope this helps you today as you think about where you're focused. You look and understand your child's sleep cycle. You look and understand those deep and active sleep patterns that are unfolding. And let's understand those sleep stages. When we can get these sleep basics in place, you begin laying a healthy sleep foundation. I hope that now that you can see how those partial arousals work at night, you understand the importance of the onset of going to sleep, working smarter and not harder. And, when I am sharing this with parents, I really work on figuring out that onset of going to sleep and those first wake ups, because that is where our children's sleep begins to get organized and develop. And then we start to see those longer stretches of sleep organically fall into place, which is great because we're doing it with our child instead of trying to force our child into a pattern that they're not ready for. Hopefully now, after also seeing these sleep stages, you can understand why sometimes just leaving your baby to cry it out at night might not make the most sense. When our children do their work and have their responsibilities at the onset of going to sleep, it makes it so much easier between 2 and 6 in the morning, which is the hardest time of night for a baby to go back to sleep. It makes it so much easier because they're like, oh yeah, I've done this before. This is nothing new. And that's the reason why when I'm working with families for sleep coaching, we don't want to just leave babies to cry it out if we haven't taught them somewhere else. That's actually what causes the most amount of crying. And so I try to help families work smarter and not harder. And let's reverse engineer it. Let's understand where we should work and where we should push in and support our little ones so that they can get those healthy sleep patterns established, which will then help you get the sleep you need to. And oftentimes, too, another reason why I don't encourage parents just to leave children to cry out in the middle of the night, if we haven't started at the onset, is because it's really hard to learn something when you're really tired. I don't know about you, but I don't learn well when I'm tired. And so the best time of day for me to work on that is at the onset of going to sleep. And believe it or not, you as the parent have a lot more energy and an opportunity to be there and be present without getting stressed out and frustrated too. So let's work smarter and not harder as we're working to get that sleep in place in your home. Thanks for tuning into today's show. You can see all of the details and show notes below. And as you go out into your day, I hope that you'll make it your mission to be calm, confident, and rested as you lead today. Sweet dreams.